This week, universal school choice is overwhelmingly popular among Ohio families. Our reporter has the stats. Bringing Bible instruction to public school, how one private sector program is attempting to introduce Scripture to students' daily schedules, and an eye-popping $3.5 million settlement with a student in an Oregon public school. Details on the way. These stories and much more coming up this week on The Lion Week in Review.
Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capital, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Now let's meet our panel, some of the men and women behind the stories at ReadLion.com. Josh Mann is managing editor of The Lion. Faith Perkins, a staff writer at The Lion. And our newest addition to this show, Jillian Schneider, also a staff writer at The Lion. Welcome to all of you. Thank you. Jillian, we start with you remotely today. Thanks a lot for joining us. Our first conversation. You've been a longtime contributor to The Lion. Glad to have you with us today. I'd love to kick off the show today talking about Ohio and this explosive popularity of the scholarship opportunities for universal school choice there. What do you know?
Yeah, this isn't the first year that Ohio has had the CSA program. It's been around for a few years. But this is the first year that it's been universal, and applications have just absolutely skyrocketed. They've already approved nearly 90,000 students for scholarships under this program, and applications don't even close until the end of June, so they may still be approving more. And that's more than double what they were approving last year. So clearly, not only is, kind of there more buzz about these programs because of what's going on in the news, but parents actually are taking advantage of them in the thousands. So that's very encouraging.
Josh, is this state of Ohio, are they the most popular heretofore, or do we know, in terms of people that have offered universal school choice of the 11 or 12 that there are? Do we have any stats on, this sounds huge compared to others. I don't know. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on the numbers. Jillian, chime in if you've got different numbers. I know Arizona had a big uptake when they released their program. Florida has had school choice for a long time and has essentially made it's more or less universal. They've expanded some things, and so I think their numbers are very high, but I don't know how they compare. But it is, we are seeing huge uptake of the opportunities, and polls continue to suggest families want it, and it seems like there's just a huge appetite for it.
Jillian, in your story, roughly 90,000 scholarships, as I read it, as of the middle of March, 90,000 applications, that is, for scholarships. You have written extensively at The Lion about other states and school choice or universal school choice bills and legislation. What's kind of your overall assessment of where things stand with universal choice state by state?
Yeah, that's a great question. Things are really exciting. Obviously, last year there was a lot of momentum, and that's carrying through this year, especially among the southern states. We're seeing Georgia has gotten their bill all the way through the legislature. It's just now waiting for the governor's signature, and the governor will very likely sign it. We see Alabama got it through this year. Louisiana has a few bills that are a bill in the Senate and a bill in the House that have made it out of committee. Arkansas is kind of a southern state as well. They passed last year. South Carolina has a bill in their legislature to take their current program and make it universal. So we're seeing a lot of momentum everywhere, but especially in, states with strong Republican influence. And that's great. I think what we see on the flip side is that the main barrier is states that have something called Blaine Amendment. These were not added into all state constitutions, but a lot of state constitutions have them, and they basically have wording that says that public funds can't go to private schools or to religious schools. And so a lot of states with these Blaine amendments are having trouble getting school choice passed because of legal questions over whether it is going to the benefit of these private institutions and whether that's legal in that state or not. But we've seen, obviously, that school choice has been passed still in a lot of states, even with these Blaine amendments. And a lot of school choice advocates are saying that Blaine amendments, are kind of an anti-religious thing that shouldn't be around anymore, and also that school choice legislation is getting through anyway. So it is a barrier, but it's not something that actually is stopping them.
I tell you, if this is a subject that's important to you, go to readlion.com. Jillian has written extensively about several different states, from Wyoming to South Carolina to Louisiana, and this issue, most recently, Ohio. Jillian, thanks. Let me turn, Faith, to a story you've been working on, or had just worked on at The Lion, on Ohio. We're also going to stay in Ohio for a second, too. What's also interesting to me is while we're talking about universal school choice, also it seems those of Christian faith are, if you want to use the word, asserting their right to return faith instruction into the public schools. That's kind of what your story is about.
Yes, so LifeWise Academy is an Ohio-based nonprofit which teaches religious instruction during school hours to public school students off campus. And the cool thing about this that they say is like a lot of these students don't have an opportunity to learn about God outside of school. And now that they have an opportunity to learn about it at school with parental consent.
It's a really interesting story, Josh. I talked a little bit to the LifeWise founder myself a few weeks ago, and one of the things that he pointed out to me was it's always been legal to do it this way. That is, to bus people off the campus, kids off the campus, go study Bible for 45 minutes and take them back. That's been legal since the 50s.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And it's called release time instruction for any in the audience who are curious about this. It does require parental consent. They bus the kids off site for this release time instruction, and they can teach religious things for that amount of time. And, you know, LifeWise own surveys are suggesting that there's huge support for this, even among parents who aren't that religious, that actually they're very much welcome faith-based education as part of their child's upbringing. And so I think that's encouraging. You know, the Freedom from Religion Foundation always shows itself in situations like these. And what I noticed about their complaint about this wasn't that it's illegal, because they know it's legal. It's that they're actually worried that a school might think they have to do it.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was interesting. It seems like, you know, that they really are an anti-religion organization. And so I think their opposition is not does not represent what a majority of families want, even non-religious ones.
And Faith, my understanding is, you know, we've done stories, I know, and covered stories at the Lion about these Satan clubs that are popping up. They're asserting their rights to be there and fighting regularly with school districts around the country to be there. LifeWise's attitude is, okay, fine, we'll see your Satan club and raise you this Bible study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what's cool. Jillian, do you think this is a trend that will continue and grow in schools across the country, more biblical instruction outside of the school building?
I certainly hope so. And I think it comes back to a really existential question that we're having to ask right now, and not just about education, but even other sorts of kind of government, is whether or not religion has any part in our public society. Because there are some groups like the Freedom from Religion Foundation who would have us believe that being religiously neutral and tolerant of other religions means having absolutely no religion, that we must, you know, completely rid ourselves of any sort of anything that resembles religion, can't be in public school, can't be in the public sphere. And I think that's absolutely wrong, but that's the view that some of these groups are trying to push.
And while we're talking about it, you've also written a story about the Ten Commandments coming to Utah schools. Explain that one.
Yes. So the Utah legislature and the Utah governor signed a bill that allows schools to teach the significance of the Ten Commandments, as well as other historical documents like the Magna Carta and the U.S. Constitution, as part of U.S. history. And some people, you know, made a fuss about it, saying, oh, you know, they're teaching religion and this is sectarian. But the bill sponsor, I think, explains it very well. He's not saying, you know, we're not teaching the kids to be Christians. He's saying we're teaching them the importance of this historical and religious document. And it goes back to that idea that, you know, in order to understand our society and our culture and to be educated, you need to understand these things. You need to understand religious viewpoints and religious arguments, because they made culture and society the way it is. And we can't completely divorce our education from any sort of religious or moral or ethical discussions or beliefs.
Though certainly they would try, Josh. That's kind of what when you listen to what Jillian was saying, it occurs to me, there are certain things, the law being one of them, that I really don't think you can avoid discussing the Judeo-Christian principles behind it when talking about it in a classroom.
Yeah, and I think it speaks of a fear, I think, from some. But I don't know what they're afraid of, because it is absolutely obvious that Christian faith has had an overwhelming impact on the West and on America and on our founding documents and on our culture. In fact, I mean, when you look at, let's just take literacy, for example. We're a pretty literate culture. thanks to the King James Version and Sunday school in the 1800s. And, like it or not, we can try to ignore that, but I think it's to our peril. And of course, from my point of view, it's to our peril in more than one way, even, religiously, but it's had a huge influence on us. And if we don't understand the significance of it, I think we're hamstringing the kids in a big way.
Faith, on the LifeWise Academy, back to your story for a minute, one thing that I thought was interesting about it too, that is all privately funded, just to be clear. There are no funds spent by the school district in supporting kids leaving campus to go study
Yeah,
Bible.
that's correct. It is all funded by the foundation and through donation.
Yeah, and so parents can get involved in that. In fact, in some communities, I guess they've even purchased buses.
Yes. Yeah. Churches have come together, families, community, they have all come together to supply the transportation and the needed supplies for the children.
It's a really interesting question because, Jillian, when we talk about the growth of Christian school and homeschooling, one wonders, is this a way, I don't know, I'm sure there are a lot in public school that would argue no, but is this a way that public schools can, if you want, make a play to stay relevant in the minds and hearts of families who actually value their Christian faith?
Yeah, I've spoken to schools even in my local area that partner with groups like this. And I think it's a great opportunity for public schools who, maybe have some conservative leadership or are in a community with conservative values to genuinely to partner with parents, to partner with the community, to get instruction like this made available for students. And that's when the public system works well, right? The public system works well when the teachers and the administrators and the curriculum reflect the values and beliefs of the people in the community. That's when parents are actually happy with their public schools and when it does what it's supposed to. The problem is that a lot of schools aren't doing that. They're pushing an agenda that a lot of parents don't agree with, and then often are, trying to keep that secret or just completely steamrolling over parents. So when it works like this, it's great, but often we don't see it working that way.
Yeah, and to that point, Josh, I mentioned it a little while ago. You guys have a story at the Lion. I know this first popped up in, I believe, Pennsylvania, now in Tennessee, the Satan Club wanting very much to assert their legal right to be a part of the schools.
That's right. So this organization, the Satanic Temple, actually targets elementary schools with good news clubs in order to make the political point that, well, if you're going to teach the Christian faith, then you have to accept us too. And so the Satanists, this Satanic Temple, says that they don't actually believe in Satan. It's just a symbol for them and that they're, for things that basically everybody would agree with. But the communities where they're trying to start after-school clubs certainly don't agree, including this Tennessee community, who came out against it and pretty strongly so. And then when they've been sued, they've doubled down. The community's kind of doubled down and said, no thanks, you can keep Satan, out of here. Thank you very much. And I think it goes to something that we've been discussing already, and that is this idea of local communities, local control of schools, communities, schools that reflect their values. And, frankly, if schools don't, then people will leave. And I think that's fine. I think this whole discussion also supports the idea of school choice and competition. But we'll see how the lawsuit plays out. I think the Satanic Temple has won in a suit or two, but the community there in Tennessee feels like they're just trying to push a political agenda, and I think it's pretty clear that is what they're doing.
It's such a great point. This is about the argument for keeping your local school district local. And Jillian, so often the discussions around school choice come up because people feel like there's some external entity driving the decision-making and the policy setting in their school boards, whereas you'll hear smaller school districts all the time say they're a little concerned about school choice because they say in our little town, in our little community, we're doing just fine. And that is the point, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. In small communities or rural communities, often, public schools do a much better job of accurately reflecting the values and beliefs of what's important to their families, just because they're smaller. And when you have, fewer students, it's easier to, get to know them better and know what their needs are. But, we live in a world that isn't primarily rural anymore. And so, a lot of times parents do feel steamrolled by their school board or their district or even their city leadership, who they don't really care what the parents think. They view parents as kind of uneducated people who just are there to create the children and then send them off to be educated at the government school. They don't really value parents' input at all. And it just shows you that they don't respect their opinion, and they view them as just kind of a piece of the system instead of really the ultimate authority over what a child should be learning and how they should be educated.
Another massive story at the Lion was an eye-popping $3.5 million settlement. An Oregon school district with a student. Faith, you've written that story. I don't know, maybe it's not the largest, but it's certainly one of the largest settlements I've ever heard of with a public school district.
Yes, and I think it's the largest in Oregon that school districts ever paid for a lawsuit.
Oh, and what happened in this story?
Yeah, so St. Helens is getting sued for a victim who was sexually assaulted by a social studies teacher and track coach from 2017 to 2018, despite him being reported multiple times dating back to 1998.
Oh my gosh. Josh, this, it's a sad story. I always hate to hear anything about abuse like this, but sort of interesting in a day and an age where so many of us are concerned about what public schools are keeping from parents. This, sounds bad.
It's a terrible story, and I think one of the things that you see, according to the lawsuit and the settlement, kind of seems to give some kind of substance to the lawsuit, is that this person was, they were disciplined at various times for inappropriate contact, things that crossed the line, but, weren't of the abusive nature of what he ended up doing to some of his victims. And there were warning flags all along the way since 1998. And then this victim suffers abuse in 2018. I mean, that's a 20-year period. This person has continued to cross the line. I think it was in 98, he had a relationship with a 17-year-old student that he ended up marrying when he was 24. So, that's messed up, to put it lightly. And there's a pattern of behavior, and he wasn't disciplined to the extent that he should have been. And this happens in the public system. And it happens in a lot of institutions, and there is a desire to make sure that these people are disciplined and that somehow there's a database so that they can't just move along to another school district and do the same thing. And we've seen that also happen in a lot of places. So, I think it's kind of a warning flag to observers to say, how can we keep kids safe? How can we keep schools safe? Number one, you've got to hold misbehaving teachers accountable.
Yeah, and Jillian, to that point, we seem to be trending in the wrong direction. We seem to be trending in a way that would suggest schools, public school teachers, and public school districts can, in fact, build walls between students and their parents and keep secrets, which is, antithetical to a story like this, it would seem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happened in this district is absolutely awful. And certainly, the blame rests at the teacher who was doing terrible things, and also, with the administrators who, like Josh said, knew what was going on, knew at least in part what he was doing, and didn't do much to stop it. And I don't know if it is true in this case at all, but I know in other cases, teachers' unions really do bear part of the blame for this, because a lot of what teachers' unions do is try to protect teachers' records, even when these are people who clearly should not be around children, students. And I think unions need to be involved in that conversation as well of how do we, hold teachers accountable and make sure that teachers who shouldn't be around students get fired and their misdeeds are made public, instead of, like Josh was saying, just kind of reaching some sort of settlement and then moving them on to the next school is what happens often nowadays. And I think teachers' unions bear part of the blame for that.
And I guess, I would just add, Josh, I guess more specifically what I meant to say was when we are talking about teachers keeping gender confusion issues from parents, potentially you're talking about these kinds of people, these odious kinds of monsters, keeping secrets with kids from their parents. I mean, it's, it's going the wrong direction is my point.
Yeah. We've got to have more transparency.
Finally, on today's docket is a story about the Department of Education and huge waste of taxpayer dollars. Josh?
Yeah, it might not come as a surprise, but the Department of Education, they have a classroom innovation program, which sounds really great because I think a lot of people would like to see innovation in public education, especially the school choice crowd. But this specific program had a 74% failure rate while costing taxpayers billions. And this comes from a recent report from the Institute of Education Sciences. So there were 172 grants issued in the for about $1.4 billion between 2010 and 2016. But only 112 of the 172 came back with properly tested findings. So I don't know what the what would that be? What the 60 that didn't count? I don't know how those fared. But the ones they could actually count, only 1/4 of those had any measurable benefit.
Wow.
So at the most, only 25% of these innovative projects had any measurable benefit for students. And so, I don't know what the answer is. This researcher said that they think granting to giving smaller grants for a local project would be better. And if it works, then let's scale it up and put real money behind it, rather than just throwing big money at big projects, seeing what sticks. I don't think taxpayers really appreciate that.
Yeah, and often that's agenda-driven too. That money always comes with the strings attached anyway. So 74% failure rate, that's, if you were on a grading on a scale, that's bad. You'd fail. You wouldn't pass your classes. Well, now before we close out, our favorite segment of the day, and that is favorite stories by the folks that write the stories at readline.com. So Faith, we start with you. Your favorite story of the week.
Yeah, so my favorite is from Liam Siegler, one of our writers. He wrote about a pro-life young leader summit that he went to.
Oh, yes, very cool. And that Liam's been doing some great work in the pro-life space, by the way, I should just say, for those of you that are interested in that particular issue. Liam's fantastic. Josh, yours.
Well, this was a little different. Is it Jack Golke, the March Madness legend from Oakland?
Yes.
We wrote a little story on him. He had his start at Hillsdale College, a small Christian school, played 5 years there. He redshirted. There was a COVID year. The current athletes play forever, it seems like. But humble beginnings, but went to a small Christian school, kind of laid the foundation for him. And we saw him sort of go viral as he hit 10 3-pointers against Kentucky and in a big upset, and then did pretty well against, I think it was NC State after that. But you can read more about that at the Lion.
By the way, you guys are keeping a bracket there in the Lion offices, by the way. How are you all doing?
Not last, which is important, because the person who's last, I think, maybe has to watch 2 other people eat lunch.
So, Jillian, you have a favorite story cooking this week at the Lion?
Yeah. Story that we published was a Gallup survey that recently came out that found that married people are happier.
Uh-huh.
And as a newlywed myself, I definitely agree that is true, but I think it's always encouraging to get the message out there, especially to young people, that marriage is not a burden or a ball and chain, that marriage actually is the thing that helps society and individuals thrive.
Great point and great story. Great way to wrap up today's show. Glad you're all here. Thanks a lot, Jillian. It was great to check in with you, and we'll welcome you back again soon. And that'll do it for the show this week. Keep up to date on all the latest news every day at readlion.com. And for all of us here at the Lion, thanks for downloading the show. We'll see you next time.